Some chase greatness, others build it. From the heart of New York, where every possession feels like destiny, comes the pulse, the fire, the relentless Redstorm. This is not a podcast. This is a proving ground. A battlefield where fans become family, where voices clash, truth bleeds through passion, and loyalty is not spoken, it's lived. We are here to question, to challenge, to ignite, to ask not what St. John's was, but what it's about to become. Led by Coach Pitino's vision, fueled by the city's soul, driven by fans who never back down. Because here, we don't whisper opinions, we declare war with words. Every debate, every drop of sweat, every heartbeat, this is Redstorm Nation Unfiltered. You just stepped into Relentless Redstorm. Welcome to another episode of Relentless Redstorm. I'm your host, Jason Safford, alongside my partner in the storm, Derrel Jazz Johnson. And we are here live from Madison Square Garden post-game, where St. John's has beaten Iona 91-64 in a terrific first-half defensive effort and second-half offensive effort featuring Isaiah Sellers, Ian Jackson, and Bryce Hopkins. Derrel, I saw a lot tonight that was positive for St. John's, and I think the highlight for me was Ian Jackson starting at point guard. And even though he had some turnovers, he commanded the game overall and did a very impressive job of leading the team and making the fans feel like St. John's had somebody running the ball for it.
Well, first, let me say, we are actually side by side with each other.
Right.
For the first time ever, Jason is right next to me. So this is the first time that we are doing the podcast in person, live here from Madison Square Garden. It is a little chaotic. The St. John's Redstorm defeated Iona at noon, and the New York Rangers play tonight. So we will not be here long because we will get kicked out. But I have talked about Ian Jackson needing to be in the starting lineup ever since I heard Rick Pitino talk about his talent. Did my research. He's predicted to be a first-round pick in the 2026 NBA draft. A player with talent of that magnitude has to be in the starting lineup, and especially should not be sacrificed to someone like Dylan Darling, who, in Pitino finally admitted today, has not played great, has not shot the ball well. Pitino talked about today Dylan losing confidence in his shot. He talked about having to rebuild his shot, rebuild his confidence. That's a negative to what's going on with the team, but lots of positives. I think when Zuby is getting 8 blocks in a game, I feel that is a great way of him leading this team, leading from the defensive end, especially when this team has so many offensive weapons. If Zuby can lead overall from the defensive floor and rebounding, that is peak, what I believe is peak St. John's Redstorm for this season.
I agree. I think that, and you heard me ask the question post-conference, the coach, well, Rick Pitino specifically, talked about his veterans and how Zuby was playing. And I think that the emotional intelligence that Zuby is providing to the team right now, 2 games in a row with 8 blocks, is a significant effort, but even more so, you see it between him and Dylan Mitchell. The relationship in terms of defense, both of them are getting at it, and it's carrying over to the rest of the players. And going back to Ian Jackson, what I think he did best tonight was play a great defensive game, especially against CJ, the Iona front court.
CJ Anthony, yes.
Yeah. They were very, very aggressive. They were driving to the lane. Ian cut off a lot of plays on defense. He made some great switches. He should be the starting guard for because of his size. He has very, very good length. And he's also a terrific offensive guard. Very, very aggressive going to the basket. Made a fantastic pass tonight that had the crowd into it. But also, even though he took a couple of aggressive shots, which nobody liked, the fact that he's pulling the trigger quickly and getting at it defensively, I think are great signs of encouragement for the team.
Absolutely. I going back to the scoring, because once again, St. John's over 90 points. They scored 91. 4 to 5 starters in double figures. 2 guys off the bench had scored in 10 or more. 6 players in double figures. No one over 20 points. So it was a very, very balanced attack. A very different game if you look at it from the halves. St. John's played incredible defense in the first half, only allowing 26 points. And then their offense took over in the second half, where they outscored Iona 55-38. So we are seeing once again that this team is becoming a better offensive team, a better defensive team. And in the second half, they were able to show that they can still score the ball, can control the pace. And when this team is going up and down with all of their weapons, they're going to be a difficult team to stop.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you have to look at as a turning point in the season, and we're really going to see it on Tuesday against DePaul and most likely against Kentucky, is this going to be the St. John's team going forward, where their goal in the first half is to shut down the other team's offense, the gates in the second half, more offensive, really put it on the other team. I think that this was a great strategy against Iona for this particular game, and coming off against the win against Ole Miss, where it was a tremendous win from a defensive effort to have the second half that they had today, because they started out today very much like they did against Ole Miss. They were very, very tight offensively. Isaiah Sellers especially looked like he just wasn't there yet. He didn't have the rhythm. Joe Sansanen was really the catalyst in the first half, picking it up, taking the confident shots from three-point range. Unfortunately, Salmon kept getting into foul trouble. And I think that's one of the things about this St. John's team is, can they control themselves in terms of the fouls? Because they've got so much offensive firepower and they're starting to get the defensive discipline that they need. Now it's just a matter of managing themselves in terms of the fouls. They were really good at getting Iona into foul trouble in the first half. In the second half, they kind of got away from it, partially because they were hitting their three-point shots. So they didn't really have to rely on going into the paint and getting fouls on Iona. But it's something to think about as they go up against DePaul and Kentucky and Georgetown. The rest of the season is going to be much more of a grind against top-tier teams that they've got to be able to play both inside, outside.
I going back to Ian Jackson, and Ian Jackson's hair was a big. It might have been questions about Ian's hair might have taken up the first 4 minutes.
Ian's hair was on fire.
It was like the first 4 minutes of the post-game press conference. It was absolutely hilarious. But I never thought I would hear Rick Pitino say that a player that had 5 turnovers, it wasn't really his fault. Only one of the turnovers was a bad turnover. But this happened during the game, or maybe after the game, when I looked at the box score, and I said, wow, Ian Jackson had 5 turnovers. It didn't feel like he had 5 turnovers. And it didn't feel like he had 5 turnovers to Rick Pitino either. And Rick Pitino was very impressed with the game he played today, particularly on the defensive end, which you mentioned. He had 3 big steals in the game. I remember one in the first half where it was a Iona player driving to the basket for a layup, and Ian stripped him. So this is the Ian Jackson that St. John's needs going forward, who's going to improve and become a better player, become that player who may get drafted in June and be playing here at Madison Square Garden next year in the NBA uniform. But in order for Rick Pitino to get the best Ian Jackson there is, he absolutely needs to be in the starting lineup. And it's a big step for him today by being in the starting lineup. And hopefully he doesn't do anything foolish to have that role, have that promotion revoked going forward.
You opened the door for Sharon Moore, but I promise that I won't go any further than mentioning his name in that context of now that Ian is in the driver's seat in the starting lineup. Yeah, it's just a matter of discipline, and Rick Pitino is a master of discipline with his teams. So as long as Ian lives up to Rick's expectation of just listening and doing what he needs him to do, I think Ian's got incredible upside potential, to Rick's point. I want to also talk about Dillon Mitchell, who I think is really the engine of this team. He is right now the sixth man, but Dillon's energy and Dillon's floor presence. You talk about what Ian did in the starting lineup today, absolutely floor presence. This is a Rick Pitino trait. He looks for players to have floor presence. Dillon Mitchell, every time he comes into the game changes. He has such floor presence, and one of the things he's looking for is to be able to disrupt the other team's offense, get a block, get a steal, get it up court, make a fast break transition play. Dillon is absolutely, a catalyst in terms of St. John's up-tempo offense. Now, that being said, the exciting thing about today's game against Iona for me is looking forward into DePaul, looking forward into the Big East Conference. Rick even said it tonight that right now UConn is the team to beat, but we're a long way from March. And this team showed tonight such a level of upside potential to me that January, February, I think it's going to be even more exciting to look at Ian Jackson, Dillon Mitchell, Josan Sannon, and Osiah Sellers. Those four players are competing for starting time. And, you have Zuby and Bryce, who are absolutely established. They are dominant Clydesdales that are going to have a great season against the other front courts of the Big East. And Zuby tonight, again, really turned it up defensively 2 games in a row. Didn't worry about the offensive points tonight because he had so many players around him doing what he needed them to do that he didn't even play the last 8 minutes of the game. And I think that is something that makes Pitino feel good, is the fact that he can give Zuby lots of rest at the end of the game in these early season contests and save him for later in the season when it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight.
Again, just an all-around great game. And, we heard Pitino post-game talk about wanting to get players minutes, but he just can't. There's only 5 players that can be on the court at one time, and he's doing his best to get the best matchups on the floor. But there are a lot of players that played well today, including Lefty. He played 15 minutes. He hit a big 3. Had a good stretch during the first half in which St. John's got the lead and pulled ahead by a little bit. What I like about him is he was aggressive today. He was two or three, so he could have been more aggressive. But on offense, he knows how to space the floor, and that's how he was able to knock down one of his 2 3-pointers. This is another point that Rick brought up post game. He said he doesn't think this team will be as dominant as they were last season in the Big East as we look ahead to the Big East schedule that starts on Tuesday when the Johnnies host the DePaul at Cornasecca Arena. And he also echoed something that I've been saying um, since our first podcast here at the Relentless Redstorm. Pitino has the cauldron. He has all these players deserving of minutes, all these talented players deserving of minutes. He needs to find the right combinations uh, to build this team to be the most effective it can be. That will not happen in December. That will not happen in January. Hopefully, it's happening in February, and the team is peaking into March, going into the Big East tournament and going into the NCAA tournament. So, getting back to what Brick said pregame today, UConn is right now the best team in the Big East, obviously. Again, I said that. Even though St. John's, I believe, they were ranked 4 and 5 in the AP poll, but St. John's was actually picked to win the Big East. UConn was obviously going to be a better team to start the season with because of continuity. The question is, which team is the more talented team? I still believe that it could be St. John's, and we may see that during the Big East tournament when these two teams clash at least 2 times during the regular season and perhaps a 3rd time in the Big East tournament.
Yeah, I definitely am aligned, and I think you're aligned with Coach Pitino in your thinking. One of the differences between UConn and St. John's is the schedule. St. John's has one of the toughest schedules in the country. I think it was ranked 10th in the country in terms of their overall schedule. So there are no cupcake games for St. John's this season. And anybody who thought that Iona was going to be an easy contest, you're really not giving respect to Iona, which in the last quarter century has had the winningest record of all New York teams, including pro basketball. So Iona College was definitely not a walkover game. So the fact that St. John's won by 27 is a credit to, again, how well they're coming together on defense and the fact that their offense is coming alive. Their offense has incredible ability to go even further. Josan Santa, again, had a tremendous first half overall. He has the ability to be a 25, 30-point scorer. He just needs to continue with his aggressive shot taking and also, work even harder on defense and cutting off the lanes and just staying out of foul trouble. And, Pitino's challenge is going to be managing minutes, to your point. I think the other thing that Pitino really has to look at is how does he get the same defensive prowess out of the rest of his players when Ejiofor and Mitchell are not on the floor? Because there's a dramatic difference between when they're on the floor and when they're not. They were very fortunate the last 2 games, both Ejiofor and Mitchell stayed out of foul trouble. And again, I think that's one of the testaments to them as senior players. Interestingly enough, again, the buy-in that Dylan Mitchell has made here at St. John's in his first season and almost matching Ejiofor's energy and quality of play is one of those tremendous relationships where you have a 3-year player and a new player. Their chemistry seems to be very aligned in terms of how they're leading this team in, from the defensive side. And now it's really about how do the new players align themselves with that energy on an offensive side. So again, getting back to Isaiah Sellers, Ian Jackson being able to lead this team on the offensive side is going to be what separates them from a lot of teams and puts them in that top tier with UConn and going into the March Madness tournament, being able to really, go past the first weekend, which they weren't able to do last year.
Speaking of Dylan, and Rick Pitino is a walking quote machine, but he compared Dylan Mitchell. He said there were 2 players that he would pay to see. Dylan Mitchell is one of them. The other was 4-time NBA champion, 2-time uh, NBA MVP, including the only unanimous MVP in NBA history, Stephen Curry. That was certainly not something
I definitely
ever
was not
expecting to
him to do
hear.
that. Yeah.
But it's the highest compliment to a player like Dylan Mitchell,
From a Hall of Fame basketball coach.
from a Hall of Fame basketball coach, especially after a game where his stat sheet doesn't scream how well he played.
No.
He had 10 points.
No
he had
assists,
4 rebounds.
no steals, no blocks.
Yeah, but he is such an energy player, and he changes the game when he came off the bench. When came off the bench, he changes the game with his energy, with his intensity, particularly on the defensive end, but on both ends of the floor.
Yeah. So looking ahead now, the Johnnies have DePaul on Tuesday. Derrel, what do you see in that matchup that could be an opportunity for St. John's?
Well, I think the biggest advantage that St. John's has, similar to what they have here at Madison Square Garden, is that on-campus Red Storm crowd. I think the team will feed off of the crowd, especially with it being the first Big East game, first Big East conference game that they're hosting. We discussed this last week that St. John's need to get through these games before the Kentucky game. They've gotten through two of them. The ugly win against Ole Miss, and I'll continue to say it's better to win ugly than to lose pretty. Today is a win that you feel a lot better about, and then you get it done against DePaul on Tuesday, and then get ready for. It's weird that you start the Big East conference schedule, and then you go play Kentucky out of conference, but they have a big game a week from today in Atlanta against the Kentucky Wildcats, another former, another team that Rick Pitino formerly coached at. But I'm sure there will be a lot of faithful Red Storm fans there. There will be more Kentucky fans there in Atlanta. So that will be, although it's a neutral site, it will be like a road game.
I think one of the things that's very exciting about that Kentucky game, and we talked about it, and obviously we've had some time between the last podcast and now, but we talked about it from the standpoint of Kentucky being the big circle on the schedule, that everything is going to shift based on the Kentucky game. And that's not to discount DePaul or look past DePaul. I think the key to Tuesday night is St. John's is opening the Big East season at home against DePaul. And the big challenge that they're going to have, and they really need to get back to, is rebounding. So one of the things about tonight's game was that St. John's out-rebounded Iona 42-31. But in the first half, it was only a rebound difference. Both teams had 20-something rebounds. I think St. John's had 25 and Iona had 23. In the second half, St. John's dramatically changed the outcome of the game because they were gobbling up all the rebounds, and they took the ball away from Iona several times. No second chance points for Iona, which I think was also a big thing. And that deflates a team when they're not able to get rebounds. So again, DePaul is a very, very tough team. They're going to go after every rebound. And if St. John's takes away those rebounds from them, I think that they've got a significant chance to have a very good game against DePaul. Now, that being said, one of DePaul's other strengths is defense. Right now, DePaul is actually one of the better defensive teams in the Big East. And it's going to really be about Jackson, Sellers, and Salmon taking the pressure off of Ejiofor and Hopkins to score. And the more they're able to do that, the more they're able to have a balanced attack against a team like DePaul. I think they've got a very good shot at having a good game, high scoring, and being able to keep DePaul below 60 points.
I agree. they have the ability to dominate that game from the defensive end of the court. And yeah, I'm not going to say they should. I'm going to leave it at they have the ability to do it. Um, Rick Pitino talked about, I mentioned earlier that he talked about how it would be difficult to defend the Big East title. The Big East is better. He mentioned Creighton. He mentioned Marquette. He mentioned UConn. He did not mention Seton Hall. Seton Hall,
Yeah.
Which they played not too far from where we are at Madison Square Garden. You simply take and I know a lot of St. John's fans, the St. John's faithful know this. You take the train from Penn Station, New York to Penn Station, Newark, and Prudential Center where Seton Hall plays. It's a short walk away. Those games will be a lot more competitive than they were last season. I was in the house when Kadari uh, returned to Seton Hall. Got booed a lot, if you recall. But that game will be a lot tougher because Seton Hall's a lot better. Seton Hall actually received quite a few votes in this week's AP top 25 poll. So that's a team to certainly be a little concerned about in the Big East. And I was a little shocked that, again, they're 9-1. I was a little shocked that Coach Pitino did not mention them by name.
You know, I think Pitino has his strategies. Sometimes he intentionally doesn't mention one team versus another simply because of his own choice to motivate his players or try and create controversy, in the press. He's a master of manipulation when it comes to the press, and being a part of that experience, it is a very unique experience to listen to Pitino talk in a post-game conference. Going back to today's game and sort of looking at it from the standpoint of how he sees the next couple of games, the fact that he talked about Dylan Darling being his immediate crisis after this game, and the fact that he's got to work on Dylan Darling starting tomorrow, when, to your point, Dylan Darling has demonstrated that he's not that important a factor in terms of this team's success. So it makes you wonder, why is Dylan Darling the crisis that Rick Pitino needs to solve going into DePaul, when the truth is working on the team's continued improvement on defense, working on the spacing, working on the transitions would be much more something that you would expect Pitino to say. But again, it's the difference between winning and losing. They had a tremendous win tonight, and so rather than talk about all the things they need to correct, he decided to focus on one player in particular and say that was his new pet project, that is a crisis.
Absolutely, and again, we as you said, as we know, Rick Pitino says everything with a purpose. I do not know, other than building up the confidence of Dylan Darling. As a point guard on this team, he can be valuable as a backup point guard. I saw his numbers. He played for mid-major last year, put up big numbers. I remember in one of the Facebook groups, somebody said, Dylan Darling is not a Big East point guard. I'm not sure if I would go that far, but I think we all see that he's not a starting point guard in the Big East, but he can be valuable off the bench. And I think Rick Pitino said what he said post game today, so that Dylan Darling is a valuable point guard coming off the bench for this team.
That's a good point. And I think that, again, looking forward to the next game against DePaul, you might actually see Darling play a little bit more simply because of the hint tonight. Again, Jackson had a solid game tonight. I think coming off of the last couple of games and everybody talking about Pitino needing to make a switch at point guard, the decision to play Jackson first and allow him to showcase himself in front of the home crowd, here in the Garden in Iona, where that they were going to have some Bronx natives, since Iona's right up the street in New Rochelle, that it was going to be a significant confidence builder for Jackson if he played well. And I think that was the only gamble for Pitino, was Jackson really going to show up tonight? And I think he did. I think Jackson actually demonstrated a level of maturity that we did not see in any game previous this season. What I like most about the team, and you can see it through Jackson, is the improvement not only on their defense overall, but their individual defensive movement. One of the things that Jackson did tonight that was really, really noticeable was his shift from hip to hip in terms of guarding against, a very, very, very good CJ Anthony, who played tremendous tonight. And I had to, ask him post game, because he put up 20 points, and I don't think he had one shot where he didn't have a defensive hand in his face. There were no open looks for him all night, and he made some tremendous shots, including a big three from about 10 feet beyond the arc.
As I was watching him play, I'm thinking, not to mention any names, but I'm thinking, can we make a trade? Somebody on the St. John's bench for Iona, CJ Anthony, gutsy guard, not the tallest player, obviously, stocky, so he has some weight on him. He has some strength to him, but very gutsy in the way that he shows fearlessness when shooting basketball, be it from 3-point range or at the rim. Certainly a very impressive player for Iona.
I'm going to, not only agree with you, but I'm going to say he reminds me of a certain St. John's player who played 40 years ago, Mark Jackson. Same level of, size and intensity. Better shooter than Mark Jackson.
Yes.
And, to that point, again, looking at what Pitino has built here, he has a starting team, and really the first 8 players in Pitino's rotation are all long and can play the game on both sides of the floor. It's just a matter of their continuity. The one word that I think I was looking for tonight was consistent, and consistency in the game. And I actually think that they lived up to that. Overall, St. John's was very consistent. The most important thing was that they did not give up after making mistakes. They were in the game, every loose ball, even if they lost it, they committed to getting back on defense, keeping their head in the game. You didn't see any breakdowns, which was most important. Again, going into the contest on Tuesday at home against DePaul. And, I think, just to look at it from the standpoint of what the momentum is that they have to build on, that consistency is really going to help carry them forward against a team like DePaul, which, again, has, I think, 4 or 5 returning players. Again, DePaul is, a mid-tier Big East team, but they're solid. They don't have any standout players, but they play together. They are very consistent, and that's what St. John's is going to need in their own team to be able to, overtake a team like DePaul effectively. So on that note, Derrel, I'm going to give you the last word.
Yes, we definitely need to wrap it up so we are not getting ushered out by security here at Madison Square Garden as they prepare to welcome the New York Rangers tonight. I think you feel a lot better about this team today. You can take what you saw today and kind of imagine what this team can be in January and February and March. You're starting to see what this team can become. I love the emphasis that Zuby Ejiofor is putting on the defensive end of the floor. Um, he's leading through his offense. He didn't have the greatest. He's leading through defense rather. He didn't have the greatest offensive game. He's only 2 of 5 from the floor. Only finished. He was the only starter not in double figures. Imagine that. ZB Ejiofor was the only starter not in double figures, but he had 10 rebounds and he had
8 blocks.
8 blocks. So phenomenal. I don't think I would have ever said Zuby Ejiofor had a phenomenal game, and when she only scored 6 points, he had a phenomenal game because he had 10 rebounds and 8 big blocks, and Zuby is leading this team from the defensive end of the court, and that is the most important end of the court uh, for this team to be successful, in my humble opinion.
You've just been in the eye of the storm. Once again, I'm Jason Safford alongside my co-host, Derrel Jazz Johnson. Keep watching us online and checking us out as we go from game to game and through our blog, Relentless Redstorm. And we hope to see you on Tuesday. Thank you again for watching.